Hi, welcome to a special session here on the Psychedelic Assisted Therapy Global Summit. My name is Fleet Mall, your co-host for this session, and I'm really happy to be here today with the filmmaking team of the two incredible films that we're going to show during the summit, DOSED 1 and DOSED 2. So we have Dave Phillips, Lori and Glenn Brooks, and Sharon Sidhu, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves in turn. So let's begin with Lori and Glenn Brooks. If you all would introduce yourselves, say a little bit about yourselves and your relationship to the film.
Well, I'm Lori Brooks. I'm the subject of Dose, The Trip of a Lifetime, which is the second Dose movie. So in 2018, I was diagnosed with colon cancer, went through a year of treatment, and then in the fall of 2019 or late summer of 2019, found out that it was back after just 7 months. So at that point, I was pretty distressed and was told that if treatments didn't work this time around, I would have about 6 months to a year to live. So yeah, time of uh, anxiety, anger, not every emotion you could imagine was I was feeling it and couldn't find a way out of that, um, to just be able to live happily. So Dave Phillips, my good friend Dave, our good friend Dave, I think we were at your house for dinner one night, Dave, and you suggested psilocybin. You had been looking into it and maybe, oh, it was actually, I know what it was. We watched that documentary that you wanted to show us, a new understanding. That's right, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Anyways, it was a documentary put out by Johns Hopkins University about end of life uh, treatment for cancer patients, and there was a woman in there that was just caught my eye, and I don't know why I'm getting so emotional all of a sudden about something I've talked about 100 times, but um, yeah, she actually died in the end, but she was so peaceful and radiant, and I thought that's what I need. Right?
Mhm.
And so I think that must have been in late summer, and then we went away on a trip to Maui, and I got ready for my first psilocybin experience while we were in Maui. Wrote out my intentions and worked with Dave quite a bit. Uh, and then in October of 2019, I had my first psilocybin trip, and it changed everything for me. And as far as how the movie came about, um, everybody has a different story, but my story is that when I found out I had cancer in 2019, I said to Glenn, I'm just going to start saying yes to everything that comes along and see what happens. And here we are.
Wow.
I'm Glenn Brooks. I'm just happy to be here. I get to be on this little journey with Lori and all the stuff that she's been through. It's been a crazy, hard, amazing, joyful. Throw in the expletive in there, and it's been a journey to say the least. And so yeah, I'm happy to just be along for this. The film really is a story of her experience, going from believing that the chances of her death were high to facing that death in her psilocybin trip, and then just the progression from there to where she is today. For me, as her partner, but also as a bystander, watching how she dealt with it, I've just been amazed and just yeah, it's been a great journey to be a part of.
Mm. Well, wow. Well, thank you both. So, and I have not seen the film yet. I'm very much looking forward to it, and even more so now. So how about Sharon Sidhu? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Sharon Sidhu. I'm the VP of Scientific Research, Innovation and Lab Ops at Numinous. I head up Numinous Bioscience, where a very small portion of the movie was filmed. And how we came about, there was an opportunity, it was a media opportunity really. And I had no idea at the time what was going to happen. No idea how big this opportunity actually was. And I think for us, it really was an eye-opener, and it really kind of galvanized our resolve on the work that we're doing and really made it more worthwhile. So it was a real opportunity for me personally to have a look at, the work that we're doing and how it can really contribute to a bigger cause. I think everybody at Numinous, we have this saying that everyone has a Numi story. So we're all there for a reason, but this really showed how our work can affect that reason. Really was quite a privilege and an honor to be part of this. And as far as, I see I'm an outsider on this, like, Laurie's story is key here. Glenn's story is key here and what they went through. And it shows that there is a bigger cause here and a bigger picture here and how effective this medicine can be.
Oh, wonderful. And welcome, Sharon. And then Dave Phillips.
Yeah, thanks, Fleet. Thanks for having us here. I speak on behalf of all of us. I know that any opportunity we get to support this movement, which is obviously a global movement, and the burden on all of us in this room, I know, is how to promote this therapy with the integrity, safety, efficacy, and we're all fairly committed to that. So my story is I'm a therapist. I was a therapist for 30 years in the Fraser Valley here in near Vancouver, British Columbia, and kind of got really discouraged a number of years ago with the results of most of our models, and was able to look into the research and found the work being done by Johns Hopkins University and just got really interested. Had a hard time kind of getting trained in that space, so kind of connected with some mentors who trained me that way. And then I became an underground therapist, just doing this work quietly with certain people. As Laurie shared, they were friends of ours. They were in our orbit. And she, in August of that year, I'll never forget, my wife and I were on the golf course, got a text from Glenn. It was a Thursday evening, I believe, and it just said, we're calling the kids in. We're not sure Laurie's going to make it through the night. And I just remember Dell, my partner, just weeping, just so sad. But Laurie, trooper that she has survived, but it was pretty clear coming out of that event that Laurie was not in good shape emotionally, and her and Glenn weren't aware of the work I was doing, so I kind of approached them, as she said, and said, I think this fits. And I just want to make a comment on just even something Glenn had said. In so many ways, Laurie was a perfect candidate for this work. She had a deep history of meaningful spirituality, albeit had a messed up a religion a bit, but it was there. And she had this life-threatening illness, but she also had tremendous support in her life. And, and I just, this is Laurie's story. And I know Sharon and Glenn and I, we honor Laurie, her courage. And I've told her that many times, but I also honor Glenn because he's just his steadfast commitment to being honest and authentic through this process. And, I know it's not been easy through all the ups and downs, and having to continually live in the face of the risk of death has just been admirable to me. And, you are one of my heroes, Glenn, and I just wanted to say that as well, as much as, you know how I feel about you, Laurie, and I'm so proud of you. The treatment went well. And so at the time, a friend of mine, who was a videographer, him and I attended the premiere of the first Dose movie, Adriana's story, with use of ibogaine for opioid addiction, and it just inspired us so much. And we met Nick and Tyler, the filmmakers of DOSED, and Peg kind of shared with them that he might want to tell Laurie's story. So this Peg did. He started filming, and but his experience really was as a commercial filmmaker, short videos. It kind of, the scope of the project kind of started to get large for him. So he teamed up with Nick and Tyler, who really took over the project at that time. And Nick and Tyler, really expanded the scope, and their skill is seen so well in this film to tell a story which is larger than psilocybin, really about emergence and other psychedelics. And so here we are today. I don't know what the numbers are, Laurie, but I think Gabor's post of the video has received over 1 million views. And So we're just so thrilled that it seems to have captured the intention of people. And when I first saw the premiere, of course, I'm part of the film, but didn't really have hands-on with the project. And what really struck me, I said this to a friend of mine right afterwards. I said, that's less a story about psychedelic medicine. It's really a love story. It's a love that they have for each other, these two, but also their family, their friends, and just a love for life. And it comes through, and it's just a beautiful story to follow these two through their journey. So just really happy to be here, Fleet, to kind of promote the film, and that the folks at your summit are going to watch.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. So there are two films. Dose 1, I take it Dose 2 is now called Trip of a Lifetime, right? Is that and is about really Laurie's story, and Dose 1 was someone else's story, and we're going to be showing both films during the summit. So it sounds like you all are more involved with the second film project, but I wonder, could you tell us a little bit about what you do know about Dose 1?
Yeah,
Anybody can
you
give
can
us a little
see
synopsis of that?
in Fleet, you can see in Dosed One, it can also be a story of Nick and Tyler in there, because their filmmaking kind of skills. Adriana was their friend, and she was on opiates, and they wanted to help her, and so they started experimenting with mushrooms and other psychedelics, and they decided to just film it. So Dosed One has a very raw quality to it. I won't say it's hard to watch, but it's very, very earthy and yeah, just raw, and yet it's still nonetheless a similar story as you watch how this medicine used in a therapeutic context can be up to meeting the demands of opiate addiction. But you can tell when you get into Trip of a Lifetime, I don't want to say it's more polished, but you can just tell that their acumen in the filmmaking space has taken a kind of a step forward. It's a very different feel of a film. I don't know what the others think, but that's kind of my thoughts on the contrast of the two.
Anybody else have any thoughts about Dose 1 versus Trip of a Lifetime, or anything else to tell us about that first film that would be helpful to our viewers to know about?
It's got a different feel because Adrienne and I we're in completely different spaces. I came about this because of a cancer diagnosis and end of life issues, and Adrienne's was because of addiction, and so I think I like the contrast because it shows, I think, that this is useful for everyone.
Yeah. Well, evidently both are going to depict very, very powerful stories, and very personal and very powerful stories. And I think, we can, on this summit, we talk a lot about research, and we talk a lot about best practices and protocols and ethicals and standards for training, and, really get all these important subjects. But ultimately, the most powerful message often comes through stories and people's personal life stories and experiences. And film is such a powerful medium. I know that in my own research, that I did for several years before putting on this summit last year, the first inaugural version of the summit, I looked at a lot of films of clinical trials, and just seeing people sharing their experience and telling their stories on the films made of some of those clinical trials was so powerful. Yeah. And it's really what inspired me to put together this summit. So yeah, so I'm really looking forward to watching both Dosed 1 and then Trip of a Lifetime.
The kind of the person who's not here today, Peg Peters, he was really the first one that approached Laurie, I think, Laurie, right? And kind of shared the idea of, hey, can I film you during your process here? Which, Peg has just got such a good eye for story. And he just felt this would be so compelling, just to get drawn into the life of someone walking through having to live with a life-threatening illness diagnosis and the therapy, or the psychedelic therapy around it. I mean, how can you appreciate the courage it took for Laurie to say yes to that? I mean, this film follows her at different stages of her kind of recovery. She's not always at her, most glamorous best, although her spirit always comes through, and you always feel that. And anyways, and so Nick and Tyler, Peg got to know them through the Dosed premiere, connected with them there. And, that's how the project got handed off, from Peg to these more established movie filmmakers. They kind of knew what they were doing in that space. But I mean, I know for Glenn, Laurie, myself, the long hours of filming, it just, you really see how a movie is really made. It was really kind of eye-opening. And then, of course, Sharon represents Numinous, which is one of the most prominent psychedelic companies in Canada. And, their commitment to the highest level of research, they entered into the conversation very, very early on, just to say, hey, we want your level of professionalism and acumen to be part of, almost consultants to the process and to the team. I don't know if I'm unfairly characterizing that, Sharon, but that's
Yeah, so there's this movie was filmed some time ago, very early on in my career at Numinous, actually. It feels like forever and a day, but there were very few licensed facilities. So us being one of them, and Filament being one of the other ones. And so Nick and Tyler came to both facilities. And I think, like I said, there was a lot of discussions beforehand with the filmmakers about what we can and cannot do at the facility. We're very tightly regulated, very tightly controlled. And I think one of the biggest things for us was showcasing the differences between what we would consider the grey market and the legalized legal market. Again, we're cultivating mushrooms which are not considered legal, but the activities are considered legal under our umbrella and at our facility. We can't sell these products into the grey market. We can't sell them into the streets, or we can't sell them to an individual that's looking for any kind of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. Regulations have changed significantly since the exemption process that Laurie went through. It no longer exists for this kind of treatment. You have to go through a different process. So when Laurie did the exemption process, she was able to, the government basically said, you can go and find these materials yourself and they won't ask any questions. And now, however, you can only source the materials from a legal entity that's cultivating mushrooms if you're looking for mushrooms or producing psilocybin in capsule format. So it has changed a lot. We were able to provide for exemptions, and we are able to apply for the special access program as well. It's ever evolving. Regulations are slow to change, very slow to change, hopefully going in the right direction. But these products, whether they're mushrooms, whether they're active pharmaceutical ingredients, are still considered drugs under the regulations in both the US and here in Canada. And we've been very lucky to have been able to work with these materials because these licenses aren't given out easily. Very controlled, security is high, and we get audited several times a year from Health Canada. And it's the same for the US as well. So, like I said, very, very touch and go early days. But we're seeing a little bit more consistency in being able to apply for a special access program so that more patients can have access to these materials. We are looking at also approval of MDMA shortly, hopefully with the MAPS trials, and psilocybin, hopefully hot on the heels of that. So again, lots of changes coming. What we're hoping for is at some point that there will be access to medicinal mushrooms. We're looking at a long time for that to happen.
It might be purely speculative, but as we know, there's a likelihood that MDMA will be approved by the FDA and then rescheduled by the DEA in the US, hopefully early next year. And psilocybin may follow, not too long after that, we hope. Because the data is really showing that there's low risk and high benefit. So that's maybe an oversimplification, but definitely the data is very positive. So is it likely that Canada would follow suit if that happens, or is there a completely independent process in Canada that's going to take longer or less? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
So once the application goes through the FDA for MDMA, and then however psilocybin occurs, then hopefully, MAPS or whoever, progresses this product into the different regulatory jurisdictions will make that application in those different countries. So here in Canada, we're hoping that after the IND is approved in the US for MDMA, then they will make the application here in Canada. So there's a process where you would have to extend that approval into Canada. Canada obviously has its own review process, but once it's approved in the US, then it shouldn't be too long before it's available here. And then, we're looking at Numinous, we're looking at a training program. So Dave had mentioned training earlier, of getting that training. We actually have a certified training program here in Canada that we have a fundamentals course, and then we have experiential training. What that means is that people can come in, do a fundamental course on MDMA, on psilocybin. We have a ketamine course as well, and then actually get enrolled in a clinical trial for experiential training, which means that the people that are facilitating and delivering this therapy can also get trained on actual experiential training. We've been working very hard to provide these services to therapists, and our hope is to become a key counterpart in the training of these therapists to be able to deliver psychedelic assisted therapy in a more evidence-based and knowledgeable way.
In the U.S. And a number of states at the state level, and also at some municipalities, there's been some both referendum efforts and then I think some actually legislative efforts that have led to what's generally considered a decriminalization or around certain plant medicines, sometimes all plant medicines, especially psilocybin. Colorado recently decriminalized, and how that actually plays out and gets administered on a policy level, all that's still being worked out in places like Oregon and Colorado and other places. So is there anything like that going on in Canada at the provincial level or the federal level?
No, not in Canada. So everything is regulated federally here. And even in the US, for this to be a prescribed, like when we're looking at MDMA, we're looking at drug establishment rights. We're looking at this becoming a drug product with an approval process in place, which means that product itself would be federally regulated. And again, here we don't have the same options that states do in the US. In Canada, it is federally mandated as to what happens to a drug product. When we looked at when cannabis first became recreational cannabis first became legal, it was federally mandated, but then the provinces decided how it was going to be implemented, and each municipality decided what bylaws were going to be put into place. That was only because cannabis had its own regulations. We're still looking at a drug product that's regulated under drugs and therapeutics.
Can I just jump in? Because I just, it's one of the pieces, Fleet, that I love about Dosed Trip of a Lifetime is that it does show psilocybin, so magic mushrooms, the role it can play in relieving emotional distress. But it goes beyond that. I mean, just love that this medicine and how it can be useful in the therapy. But Lori's story begins to move into wellness and how to live a life of recovery. And beautiful little plant like cannabis enters into which is legal in Canada, which enters into her experience. And it's a much broader kind of perspective on how to be well than simply putting it in, when we have these conversations, what's legal and what's going to get regulated, it can get so heady so quick. And I just do love that about the Dosed 2 story, Lori, is just how it shows us, even with Gabor's inclusion and just different people in the movie, to be able to say there's many different ways to think about how to recover from cancer, because psilocybin is not a cancer medicine. It's not gonna necessarily relieve your tumor or anything like that. But some of these other kind of perspectives can really have a huge impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People always refer to psilocybin as curing my cancer, and I always want to scream, no!
Right.
And I still have cancer, but what it allowed me to do was live with cancer, to battle. I mean, I really battled it out, just coming to terms with my impending death, first of all, and learning to be okay with that. And that's what psilocybin helped me to do. And then I didn't die, which there's nobody more shocked than me. But
I'd like to explore that thread a little bit and get into a little bit of the arc of your story and your ongoing story and your story that's depicted in Dose Trip of a Lifetime. Also, I would love to touch on what Dr. Gabor Mate's role is in the film and in your life. But I was about to explore because it's interesting. Yeah, I'm sure nobody's suggesting that that psilocybin is a cancer drug, or that it somehow goes in and attacks tumors or stops the replication of cells that it drives cancer or any of these in a direct way, right? But if you look at healing and medicine in a much more holistic and integrative way, then there are many things that can contribute to healing. I mean, our usual pharmacological approach, when we think of curative medicines, we're talking about coming up with some medicine, some molecule that is going to directly go in there and attack that cancer, stop that replication process, or if it's a antiviral drug, or these kind of things. But the more overall kind of well-being enhancing things, which can then tap into or release the body's innate capacity for self-healing. So in that sense, if we think about more broadly, and I know in interviewing several interviews I've done with Dr. Andrew Weil, who's also part of this summit, and who's been one of the leading proponents of holistic and integrative medicine for many, many decades, and taken a lot of flack in the process by being somewhat critical of allopathic and conventional medicine. And from that perspective, it would seem that helping you deal with the emotional distress of facing a terminal illness, and then being able to focus on your overall well-being, it could be that in some ways, the psilocybin journey has contributed to your journey with cancer, and the fact that you are able to extend your life, or whatever the trajectory of your life and your prognosis is going to be. You are still here. Clearly, you're still here, which is wonderful news and a wonderful thing. And you look great. And so, maybe from that perspective.
If I could just say it, the thing about the movie that I think is so unique and incredible is its opportunity to look deep inside through a psilocybin experience, and then it progresses on. And in the film, what's unique, I think, is that it tells that story in a deeply human way that so many people can relate to, and it also provides a lot of background data that really helps you to see that this is more than just some fun drug that you can do on the street. You can do all of that, it's fine. But this is about the journey, and the psilocybin trip was the beginning in a lot of ways of the progression in her journey. And that to me is what that story tells in the film. And then what's exciting is how much that progression has gone on since we stopped filming, and how much more changes come. And it all started because of a psilocybin trip that opened up her mind to new ways to see things. And so
opened up her mind. One of the things I was struck by, Lori, we talked a lot about this, was just how at the start of your journey, you kept some of your pain from your children. You kind of wanted to protect them. You didn't want to burden them with your suffering, but afterwards you drew them into it. And so your relationship with your own children, which is featured in the film, became so prominent. And that also is an element of healing, right? That the love that we have with our family members can support us through like just very, very challenging experiences. So I agree with you, Fleet. It certainly can, the psilocybin can be open us up to many, many different sort of regulatory methods for our immune system, for our central nervous system, and so thankful for it. But again, this is one of the pieces I really love about this movie, is it expands to like just a number of different agencies, different ways that we can find wellness in our life. And the cancer will do with that what it will. But in Lori's case, it's a very beautiful story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Lori, has there been evidently there was a very impactful initial journey with psilocybin. Have you taken more journeys with psilocybin?
Yeah, I have. I've done 3. So the first one really just took away all my fear around dying. And the next day I saw my cancer in a box beside me on the floor. It wasn't looming over me anymore. And so my relationship to it, where I can live. And really the picture that I got was I'm now driving the bus, I guess. Or my friend Thomas, who also was one of the four Canadians approved, he said, I'm now riding the runaway horse, instead of being dragged behind it. So that's what it did. Yeah, and I was very much concerned about how Glenn and the kids were going to be when I died, because it gave me peace about dying, and I figured I was going to die, but are Glenn and the kids going to be okay? And then my second trip was more, am I going to be okay? Trying to remember when that was. Yeah, I had gone through. So after
You're trying to decide whether you should have surgery again. I think it was right around then.
Because it had come back again for the third time.
Yeah, right.
Second.
Yep.
Third time. Sorry, I get all confused in the details and what happened when. Yeah, it had come back for the third time, and I was trying to decide, do I do more of the same, or do I just call it and say it's been a good run and just live my life and enjoy what time I had left? And that's what I decided to do. So, and then it's not easy going from dying to deciding I'm just going to live my life and enjoy it. It was a pretty vulnerable time. That was really tough. And but I think I started first by just walking every day, getting out of the house and allowing my body to get better, and finding strength again that way. And then every trip was different and showed me more. And my second trip, I remember in the beginning, Dave, you can verify this, I think I just started laughing, thinking, this is so ridiculous to be afraid.
You were, yes, yeah.
And it allowed me to go forward from that. Just, I'm dying, but so are we all.
Yeah. I mean, I've mentioned, earlier, the courage that it takes to make your life so vulnerable. Can you imagine if you were at this most vulnerable stage of your life, and there's cameras in front of you asking you to talk about it for other people? But it does also draw us into the journey that people have with cancer. And, do they submit to traditional treatments of, chemo or radiation, which the film makes no comment on kind of valuing that, but just saying it's a personal decision that each person has to make. And we see you making that in real time and wrestling through it. And it's just a very intimate experience with something that so many Canadians and Americans have to travel through, this experience with life-threatening illness.
That was one of the most helpful things to me, was to be able to sit and talk about my cancer. And and Nick and Tyler, whether they were even listening or paying attention to what was going on, went, don't talk about that, or everything's going to be fine. They never did anything like that.
Right,
and it was
a
huge gift for me to just be able to talk and not have, because it's hard when you're talking to a family member or a close friend. They don't want to hear you. It's hard for them too to hear you talking. I think I'm okay with dying. And then I got to meet all these experts that I never would have had the chance to meet otherwise, and it's been a huge help for me to talk to Dennis McKenna and to talk to even the scientists at Numinous and Sharon. And even though most of that in the film, I'm nodding and smiling, having no idea what they're talking about. That was me acting. In a cut, maybe 10%. But
yeah,
I'm really looking forward to watching this film and witnessing more of your story. This is very personal for me. I lost my life partner to cancer in 2008, and she was originally given 6 months or less to live with a very aggressive kind of bile duct cancer, and she was able to extend her life for a little over 3 years, and it was quite a journey. So, I appreciate the journey you're on as well, Glenn. And did have a friend who was a kind of a poet filmmaker, and he asked Denise if he could chronicle her experience in the last year of her life. So he was just around filming, and it was made into a little 30-minute documentary. It wasn't like distributed widely or anything, but
this is your own wife's journey, and this is your experience.
Yeah, this is my experience of being on that journey with Denise, and I really wish psychedelic-assisted therapy had been available. She was a very deep spiritual practitioner, and she availed herself of both conventional treatments and a lot of deep alternative stuff, as well as her own deep spiritual practice. So she was able to extend her life with a very aggressive cancer for 3 years when they gave her less than 6 months. And I was just been thinking about that short film that was made a lot, because just recently I watched the film made of Ken Wilber's story with his love when he lost, called Grace and Grit, which is a fabulous book, but it's been made into a film, and it chronicles his wife Treya's journey, both his wife Treya's journey with cancer, but then his journey as her lover and husband and caregiver and so forth. So it's quite a rich journey into. So to now look at that in the context of plant medicine and psychedelic assisted therapy, it's just it's really incredibly rich. So where does Dr. Gabor Mate come into the picture? His involvement with the film?
Yeah, so we filmed with him. That was one of the last things we filmed, I think, other than a few fill-in shots. And I had just read his book, When the Body Says No, and really saw in myself what he was saying, that, unexpressed emotion, and when you just hold on to that, it affects you in other ways. And boy, I was the ultimate people pleaser and just wanted to make sure everyone else was happy, even when I wasn't, and never stood up for myself and said, wait a second, you can't treat me that way, and things like that. So yeah, I saw that in myself, and he challenged me that day to actually what he said was, you keep saying you're battling cancer, but you look fine to me. Why don't you say you're just living with cancer? And I went, yeah, you're right. I think I needed the permission to stop fighting and just be. And he gave it to me that day. But I changed my relationship to myself, which is what he was talking about, and what he still talks about. Changed my relationship to myself. I see it as I tore down the walls that I had built around myself to protect myself, but I also erected some boundaries, healthy ones, and I've ended some relationships that weren't healthy and were toxic, and asked, this needs to change, or we can't be in relationship. And those people didn't like what I was saying. So, but that's okay. They're on their own journey too. And someday maybe we'll come back together. But I would have never, ever done anything like that before. I would have just I don't like to use the word abuse. Everybody uses that now, but just being treated disrespectfully. And I would have never, ever done that before. And just working on some things, digging through everything really, and what is no longer serving me in my life, and getting rid of those things, or telling them to sit down and be quiet, the parts of myself. So yeah, I'm really a different person than what I was when I first started on this road. And it's nice to be able to breathe.
Yeah, we were out for dinner recently at a friend's place with you guys, I just remember thinking, Lori's such a badass now. Like she just tells you what she thinks, but you do it in your own sweet way. But you're way more out there with who you are than previous, iterations of Lori. It's so beautiful to see.
Yeah, I have to tell you a story. So, when the film showed here in Nanaimo, I took my son. He's 16, and when the movie finished, the first thing he said was, "Oh my gosh, Laurie's so cool." So
Well, now I have to live up to it too.
Yeah.
that's a really big compliment coming from a 16-year-old. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's the tops there.
yeah,
Well, even in this brief interview format, it really comes across, um, um, and that you've really been on an incredible spiritual journey. That your cancer has become a incredible journey of personal transformation and personal evolution. It sounds like, in many ways, facilitated by the psilocybin experiences, and yeah, no one would wish that journey for anyone, or for themselves, at least the cancer part of it. And at the same time, this is how life unfolds, and we all have a deep longing for that journey. We would hope it could happen without the challenges of something like cancer, but it does. It seems really, really clear that you have been able to embrace this with tremendous courage and dignity,
Yeah.
and have this unfold as a really profound journey of personal transformation for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. It's a complicated relationship to cancer. I'm thankful for the journey, but I fucking hate cancer.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't talk about the cancer part of it too much, like the
Mhm.
physical stuff. It's still traumatic and things that I'm working through, but it's all part of it, and it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey.
Wow. Glenn, I'm wondering if you would maybe speak to your journey. You alluded this has been quite a journey, and you put almost any expletive in the phrase would fit. Um, I'm sure this has also been a journey of some kind of evolution and transformation for you as well. And I'm curious as to whether you yourself have done any psilocybin journeys during this time, and so forth. And anyway, anything you'd like to share about your experience of being on this journey with your wife, Lori.
Well, I've been thinking about this all the way through, that I've been so lucky to be at the front set of seats for this film of her life, not just the movie, but everything that's gone on. It's been hard. Like, it's a hard, long, lonely walk. Very few people have been in the shoes that you obviously and I have been in. Um, and most of us don't talk about it. We never say what's really going on. We just stand tall and gird our shoulders up and fight through it all. But it's been hard, watching Lori go through some of the stuff where she's changed, how her own relationship with herself has changed our relationship of how we were. There are things that I needed to step up to and learn from, and on and on. And our kids, how we relate to our kids, how we tell, how we share the stories along the way without, making them always sad every time they come over. There's so many different things. But I would say for me, the profound moment that changed me was in my psilocybin trip that I did with Dave as well. And for me, there was lots of things in that trip that aren't germane to this conversation for me. But the one thing that really changed me was in the middle of my trip. I had to say to Lori, I was imagining Lori in my trip, and I had to say to her, this is your choice. You get to make the decision as to whether you're going to live or die, or how you're going to do your life. And I need to let go of that. Mm. And I remember very distinctly in my mind's eye that she was holding space with me during this, her and Dave. And I was holding her hand, and I don't know what was happening in the background for her, but what was happening for me is I said, you need to choose, stay or go. And I was holding on to her hand for everything I had. And she pulled her hand away and left. apparently she had to go to the bathroom at the time. But but in my trip, I saw her saying, "No, I'm choosing to let it take its course," and I had to let go of her during that, and I had to deal with that. And it was Dave. I think Dave said afterwards that was one of the most emotional things he'd seen, because I just wept and wept. But I released her. I let her go, and it's changed my relationship with all of this now too, because I know I'll be okay. I didn't before. I thought, how am I going to do this without her? But I know that if she does die, I will be fine. I won't love that part of it. I won't. None of that will be good and happy and joyful. But I know I'll survive it, and it's because of that mushroom trip that allowed me to kind of foresee that and let go. And I really believe in her choosing to let go and me letting go of her, it's allowed both of us to live with what we've got right now. That's worth more than the first 25, 30 years of our marriage, because it's been so much better and so profoundly different.
Wow. Thank you, Glenn, for sharing that. Yeah. And I was curious, there's no sense of idealizing this journey at all. Cancer sucks, basically, and it's a terrible disease that hopefully we're going to keep finding more ways to eliminate it and not have it so be such a dominant part of our human landscape. And in my own experience, there can be my life and my life partner who I lost, Denise, very strong spiritual foundation to our life. And so we ascribe to, deep spiritual values and so forth. And you can fall into trying to be the perfect caregiver or the ideal caregiver or be the good cancer patient and then, maybe you get some illumination with the psilocybin journeys and you see things that kind of make everything okay. But then on any given day or moment, you may feel like you need to completely fall apart, or you may just be really angry. And maybe you even get angry at each other at times. I mean, that was one thing that was beautifully depicted in the film about Ken Wilber and his wife Treya Wilber, the Grace and Grit film, that there were times, and these were two very deeply spiritual beings, and the beautiful depth of their relationship was qualified. But there were times when it just, at some point Ken had to leave to get some space for himself, and there was anger, and there was this, and they came back together beautifully. But I'm just curious about your experience with the permission to be able to be real and just go through the genuine feelings that you go through, and have days when there's nothing other than feeling angry or empty, and just giving yourself permission and each other permission to go through all those that roller coaster of emotions, and maybe how if psilocybin supported that in any way.
Yeah, that's there are many days and many hours that I had to fight much of the fear, and a lot of even my anger was based in fear. But I had to fight those feelings and really just stop and learn to breathe through it. And sometimes I went to my shop and worked on a project, or was happy to get out to run and get groceries sometimes, just because it was crazy in my house, especially when she was going. Part of the film, you'll see she did a high dose marijuana regiment, and in that process, she went from, you and I might take 10 milligrams and be stone crazy. She was all the way up to 1,000 milligrams a day, and this we don't know how the regiment worked or whatever, but all that to say that during that time, she was going through crazy emotions and thinking and sleeping all day, 16-hour days, very lonely, very very hard days to be a part of all of that. But we had such a great group around us that encouraged us, kept us going. We were able to share those stories over dinner at least once a week. Lori and I have the kind of relationship, fortunately, that we talk about almost everything. So we were allowed. There's a lot of people don't have that. They don't have those outlets to go to, and then it becomes a much darker place. So I feel very fortunate to have the people around me that I had. And yeah, and I just love this woman. So I'm not, I'm not, I don't, I don't resent anything that she's gone through. I just feel very, very deeply for her and want to be there to make sure whatever she has left is a good, enjoyable, fruitful, fun life. So I don't know. That's kind of how I dealt with it all. And so very, very thankful for the people around us. I don't know what you would say to that.
Yeah, for me, I just had to allow myself to stop and feel the emotions. I'm an expert at pushing things down and ignoring them. But sometimes I just take a day and sit with my emotion and allow myself to feel it. Because what I found is the only way through it is to go through it, not around it. You can't get around it. So, and I know for the last few years I've been in remission, which I think I was the last one to even accept that fact that things might be getting better. That was hard. When I started to get good news, that was probably one of the most difficult times of my journey because I had done all this work to be okay with dying. And then, but nobody, I had never thought about the possibility that I might live. And what does that look like now post cancer? That's been hard. And, you get good news and everybody's excited and wants to know, like, what are you going to do now? And when are you going to go back to work? Or like, hold on, can I have a little time to catch my breath? And it's actually been 2 years of a deep emotional healing journey for me. And I'm just now starting to feel like maybe I might live and thinking, yeah, I think I might actually want to find a little part-time job and engage more in life. But that's been 2 years of a journey to get to that place. So it doesn't end for the cancer patient. It doesn't end when the bad news stops coming. I live on a 3-month loop right now because I get a scan every 3 months. And I just got my results back, and my oncologist just used the word survivor for the first time in 5.5 years. And her survivorship. And that's so yeah. I'm feeling good right now, but in another 2.5 months, I'll be a little sketchy. Thinking, what's the next scan gonna reveal? Is this the one that turns everything again, right? So it's gone from this roller coaster of huge ups and downs to just kind of waves. And as you gradually learn to deal with the emotions and they get not so scary after a while.
Thank you both so much for being willing to share so vulnerably. Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know if this will resonate with you all. I asked this question of one of the researchers that's doing some work with end-of-life care and psilocybin. I've had long involvement in hospice care for many years and helped start a hospice in one of the first hospices in a prison, and had quite a lot of loss in my life. So it's a world I'm pretty familiar with, and I also had a relationship with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross back when I was doing that prison hospice work. She was one of our advisors, and she's very famous for her stages of death and dying and stages of loss, and it's always important for people to understand that even though it's laid out as a bit of a progression, I think it's something like denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. I know I'm missing one in there somewhere. That it's not linear and it's circular and it can come and go and it can come in any, but it seems that it has laid out a bit of a map that's very familiar to people. At least people seem to resonate with them. And I was curious if maybe since I guess at least at sometimes finding your way into some level of acceptance around something is seen as a good thing, although being able to be really angry when you need to be angry is maybe just as valid as finding a way into acceptance. But I'm just curious of your thoughts if plant medicines and psilocybin in a way were reopening to their therapeutic benefits, maybe something that kind of helps facilitate the journey through those stages in a way that is helpful to people.
One of the frameworks that I'm drawn to is this idea that all of us have a kind of a core wise self in certain circumstances, and even an inner healer. And it does seem that classic psychedelics and even MDMA seem to give us access to that kind of unconscious presence in our lives. And there's such deep wisdom and consistent wisdom, really. And that does, Fleet, does seem to be one of those, which is, as opposed to what Laurie's saying, kind of an idea that we should just stuff our feelings, don't make people uncomfortable, avoid conflict. That our own wisdom comes alongside of us and says, no, you can be angry. It's okay. Let's hold that feeling. And that we find that when we do that authentically, that it doesn't overwhelm us quite as badly, that we do have more footing. So I think there's real merit in what you're suggesting there, that psychedelic medicines are, and I'm speaking as a therapist now, before psychedelics, it seemed I could get so close to the self and there would just be too much defensive barriers. But with psychedelic medicines, the access is much greater. It requires therapeutic proficiency, as Sharon was saying. We have to train well because it's, we don't want to put people into situations that is just too much for them. But in general, I think those sorts of shifts come so naturally to us because I think we all do have this kind of, you might even call it inner therapist or whatever, that is able to kind of guide us personally through these different journeys. That's the way that I've looked at it anyways.
Wow.
It's interesting, Fleet, you mentioned plant medicine. And when we talk about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, we don't always talk about plant medicine, right? So a lot of the psychedelics do have plant origins. But what we see now, for example, the psilocybin that's going to get approved as a drug product is not going to be a mushroom. It's going to be synthetic psilocybin. So one of the things that I'm curious about is the differences between taking a mushroom and taking a psilocybin, like 25 milligrams of psilocybin, and a mushroom product that is more wholesome, that has all of the other compounds in there that could potentially contribute to the effects that it has. So I've always been very curious about the differences. When we take a drug product, it is very typically the active ingredient. Are we somehow not doing the plant medicine justice then by doing that, right? So we talk about holistic health. Holistic health can mean a lot of things. To me, holistic health means that the plant medicine is part of that, right? So in Laurie's case, she had mushrooms, she had cannabis. By using mushrooms and cannabis, did that give her a different opening per se than just psilocybin or just, a THC compound or a CBD compound? So that's really, really curious about that. I think if we look at traditional medicine, traditional plant medicine, it's plant medicine, or in this case, we're talking about fungi, but it is plant medicine and not just the synthetic compounds. So unfortunately, in this, where we're going right now with being able to deliver this under a regulated system, it is going to be those products that are approved. And we'd rather take that than nothing really at this point. One of the other things that Laurie and Glenn have talked about is community. So again, I think community is a huge part of being able to be supported in everyone's journeys. And when we prescribe to our traditional medical system, it doesn't include that. It doesn't include holistic health. It doesn't include community, right? It doesn't include all of that. So just in general, it doesn't matter what your journey is, are those important counterparts. We talk about this paradigm shift that we really want to see, and those may be some of the pieces that are missing.
That's a really important area, and we are addressing that in this summit. There have been a number of interviews, and Paul Stamets, his recommendation was very much around those issues. What are all the many compounds apart from, the specific psilocybin? There may be many compounds in the mushroom and other plant medicines that contribute to the overall healing and beneficial benefits. So if you're completely synthesizing a molecule, you may miss a lot of that. And he recommends more of an extraction process where you can extract. And if even the extraction, if you take it to really, you try to get down to just you're purely extracting the psilocybin, you may be losing a lot. But you can have an extraction process where you're still including quite a bit of the other compounds in there. But interesting, just anecdotally to what you said. I mean, one way of looking at that is as issue. What are all the contributing compounds and elements within plant medicines, like the vine that is one of the sources for ayahuasca, and the cacti that provide mescaline, and mushrooms that provide psilocybin, and so on. Looking at the multiplicity of these compounds and that benefit rather than trying to just isolate particular molecules. But then the other many in traditional culture, these plant medicines are considered to have a spiritual energy. And sometimes that's even personified into, anyway, the film, Michael Pollan's book made into the film, How to Change Your Mind, I believe, the Netflix special. There was an interview there with an indigenous elder from the Native American church around mescaline, who obviously was very familiar with taking mescaline, raw peyote cactus, but he also he was offered to take some mescaline, and I believe it was a synthetic form in a pill, and he said same spirit. That was his experience. Anyway, that's anecdotal, but anyway, that was his opinion, which is real clear, same spirit. But yeah, but those are really interesting parts of the landscape. Maybe just some final thoughts,
Okay.
anything anyone would like to share finally. So maybe we'll start with you, Dave, and then we'll go to Sharon, and then finally to Lori and Glenn. And I think
Yeah, well, I just want to just express my appreciation to you, to this global summit, and I loved everything that you've kind of referred to. So you've obviously got some really solid traction going forward, and I just hope everyone enjoys Adriana's story and DOSED, but also Glenn and Lori's story and trip of a lifetime, and I'm so proud of them. And again, their willingness to put their story on view for the world. And fingers crossed for an Oscar nomination. Wouldn't that just be the best of all things? And so thanks so much for having me a part of this conversation, please.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. And Sharon.
So I think just for closing, I've been very grateful to be part of this experience, and contributing in general. We're at such early stages of this journey in general for this making a difference in people's lives. And I think Laurie and Glenn just really exemplify what needs to happen, really, right? I think the second movie was almost normalizing for people, right? So, because, Laurie could be your best friend, she could be your mum, she could be your aunt. So it's kind of normalizing. And I think it's a probably more of an understandable road for people to take when they see how normalized it can be.
Well, thank you, Sharon. Thank you for your work, and thank you for being part of this. And maybe you, Glenn, and then we'll leave the last word to Lori.
Well, first of all, thank you to you for putting this on and hosting it and helping to get this film out there. And thank you for all the people that I hope, please go watch it if you haven't had a chance to yet, because you'll really enjoy it. One thing I'd want to just throw in there is thank you to the filmmakers. Those two guys took this raw story of our lives, especially Laurie's, and as two people not knowing how it's going to turn out in the end, and they didn't show us anything until the end. We didn't know how it was going to turn out. We didn't know how they were going to take that story, and they were so good with that story. They took it, they shared it honestly. There's no parts of it that we go, oh, I wish they'd have done this or done that. They crafted the truth of our story in such a way that it's very powerful and very meaningful, and I can never thank them enough for that. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to say one more thing about the spiritual aspect of psilocybin. Yeah, everyone was talking, I just thought what it did for me was it showed me that I belong here and my place in the universe is solid. And then just go from there. And every one of my trips, I've had a spiritual, there's been a spiritual component where I really feel like I've experienced God in some way, and it was always loving, love and joy and peace. It was never angry and you're a bad person. It was always, I'm good, just the way I am. So, I hope that this psilocybin becomes normal and legal so that everyone can experience that. Imagine what the world would be if we could all just feel that we belong and that we're valued.
Wow. Thank you so much, Lori. Thank you, everyone, for your courageous journey, especially you, Lori, and Glenn, for your really courageous journey of and also for just the courage to be willing to share your story with such authenticity and vulnerability and so forth. So I can't imagine anyone who's seeing this interview who isn't really wanting to get on there and watch the film now. So I'm hoping that many, many, many more people will get to experience your story and your film, and wish you the very best with your ongoing journey.
Thank you, Fleet. I appreciate that.